It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of March 15th, 1996. We got 6 movies to look at today, so let's just go ahead and jump on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend: Kurt Russell, Steven Seagal, Halle Berry, and John Leguizamo starring in the action thriller Executive Decision. By the way, nice of you to show Steven Seagal's last scene before he gets killed off. No joke, that's actually the last scene he's in before he gets killed off when he gets thrown off the plane. This is the directorial debut for Stuart Baird. It's a name that you may not be familiar with, but you have definitely seen his work. He's a longtime action editor. He's done many movies, including Tommy, The Omen, a lot of Richard Donner movies. Richard Linklater's a whole different thing, including the Lethal Weapon movies, Die Hard 2, Maverick, Demolition Man. This is the guy whose name has been attached to so many different movies. You may not know his name, but you have definitely seen his work before. This is his first movie he's ever done as a director. And as far as a movie for a director goes, for his first time directorial effort, I've seen worse. It's not a bad movie per se. It's not anything too great either. It's a movie that's just kind of run of the mill. It's a typical terrorist action thriller film. This time the plane is taken over by terrorists. I think a better movie that does this is Air Force One, which came out a year later. But this movie still has a lot of fun elements to it. The visuals are very impressive. The action sequences overall are very solid. The cast overall is very good here. Kurt Russell, Halle Berry, John Leguizamo, even Steven Seagal in the little bit that he's in this movie, Oliver Platt, Joe Morton, B.D. Wong. This has a good cast overall, not just of the main cast, but names that you may not be familiar with, but once you see their faces, you definitely know who they are. J.T. Walsh, Richard Ryle, trying to look to see who else is. Sean Taub from Iron Man is in this. It's an overall enjoyable film. It's a film that really does work because of how standard it is. It's very much a standard film. I even like that Steven Seagal took on the role knowing that his character was going to be taken out the way he does. Like, we all hear these stories about how Steven Seagal's kind of a pain in the ass to work with on set, but I like that he has a little bit of a sense of humor in this type of movie to actually allow himself to be killed off the way he does in this movie. I thought that was kind of interesting in this particular performance. But other than that, though, this is still a fun little movie here. It's nothing too spectacular, nothing too groundbreaking by any means necessary, but it is fine for what it is. I think it's a very solid film. I think it's a very enjoyable action film all around. Not one of the best films overall, but it's still a ton of fun either way. I give it a lot of credit for doing the things that it does. It's a very solid film. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're looking for a good, fun action movie. You definitely get it with Executive Decision. So with that said, let's move on to the next movie, and that is Matt LeBlanc starring in the family comedy Ed. And this is why Joey Tribbiani doesn't make any big leading comedies after this particular film. I mean, Matt LeBlanc did do a couple of other movies in more supporting roles, Lost in Space, Charlie's Angels, yeah, do I even need to say what's wrong with this movie? I mean, let's start with the obvious. The monkey suit is just abysmal looking. It's like Congo all over again. You could let it slide if the movie was silly and had some fun elements to it, but there's just none of that in this movie. This is a lazy comedy that just isn't funny at all. The worst thing about this movie is that it has talent on it. Matt LeBlanc can be very fun. You've got Jack Warden in this. He's been great in a ton of movies. Bill Cobbs is also in this movie. It's written by the guy who directed The Sandlot. The director of this made one of my favorite movies of all time. He was one of the producers and writers on one of my favorite movies of all time, Twice Upon a Time. You may not have ever seen it before. It's a fantastic stop-motion film, animated film from the 1980s. Well, not really stop-motion, but it's a unique animated film from the 80s produced by George Lucas. Very underrated movie. Definitely go and check that one out. But I can't believe that his name is on this as the director. I'm just like, there's no way that this is made by the same guy that made Twice Upon a Time. There's just no way, but sad but true. And that's pretty much the best way you could describe this movie. Oh, and Jim Caviezel's also in here too. Jesus from Passion of the Christ. But like I said, there's not really much more you can say about this. This is a movie that's about as bad as it gets. Unfunny, unenjoyable in all types of levels. Like, Dunstan Checks In was way better than anything that this pile of junk came out. And that came with it. That came out 3 months before this movie did, so... Or 2 months before this movie did, but... but you get the idea. Bottom line, Ed is not a very good movie. And like I said, you wonder why Matt LeBlanc never had any big leading starring roles after this movie. He just kind of went down to being more of a supportive role character in movies that he's in. With that said, on to the next movie, and that is Antonio Banderas starring in the comedy Too Much. So I guess that trailer doesn't really show the overall plot of this movie, but basically what happens is Antonio Banderas ends up falling in love with this woman who actually has a twin sister. The twin sister is played by it's Melanie Griffith and Daryl Hannah, but because of this, Antonio Banderas decides to bring in his twin brother, which he plays a dual role here. That trailer doesn't really show that in there. It's only a little trailer that can show there, but you think there'd be some potential there, but no, this is pretty stupid. This is not a very good idea for a film, especially with Melanie Griffith and Daryl Hannah. There's clearly a difference there in terms of there's clearly a difference there between the two of them that they're not really all that similar to. They're not really. They don't really look like twin sisters. I'm trying to say, but I mean, this could be something that could be interesting. Could be have a very good idea to it, but no, this movie just doesn't have that whatsoever. It's a movie that really is just a lazy excuse to try to make a cheap comedy out of the small budget that they had. But we got Antonio Banderas, who's one of the big rising stars of the time period, and it just doesn't work. It's a film that has some good intentions to it, has a good idea to it, but it's mostly just a forgettable mess of a film. It's just not enjoyable whatsoever, and there's not really much more you can say about it. So, quick one on that one. That is Too Much. Let's move on to the next movie, and that is the documentary The Celluloid Closet. Basically, the documentary is about gay representation in movies, mostly stuff that was that was done during the Hollywood production code era. The documentary interviews various notable celebrities connected to the Hollywood industry to comment on various film clips and their own personal experience with the treatments of LGBT characters in films, from the sissy characters to the censorship of the Hollywood production code, which is the code of gay characters, and cruel stereotypes to changes made in the early 1990s. This is a documentary that wants to try to examine that, and you also have these various different people that are involved in this. Lily Tomlin is one of the narrators. Tony Curtis is among the people that are interviewed here. Whoopi Goldberg. You saw Harvey Fierstein, Gore Vidal, Paul Rudnick, the writer of The Addams Family, Shirley MacLaine. Tom Hanks is involved in this. John Schlesinger, Harry Hamlin, Susan Sarandon. They get notable names in here. And as you saw in those clips there, they talk about the various ways that in the early days of filmmaking where they got around making gay characters. They made characters that were basically, like I said, known as sissies. Some of them were vampires, and some of them were like mystical. They had like mystic powers and stuff like that. And they talk about it in this documentary and the little bits that I've seen from the little bit of clips I showed you there from the Siskel and Ebert review. But that's pretty much really all I know about this. I haven't seen this documentary, but it seems like a very interesting concept, like to talk about that type of a period in movie history where you had these different people talking about gay representation in film. And actually came out during a drastic time in gay history when Bill Clinton was elected president, and he was the first major presidential candidate to court and promisingly opened was promisingly open with gay voters. However, that was around the time when we had Don't Ask, Don't Tell pass, and because of that, the LGBT rights movement became increasingly media-focused, and that's why the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation was formed as a national organization, and this documentary came out 2 years afterward to talk about march and protest against homosexual representation in films and TV. That grew as well. And really, gay people were not written well for most of the 1990s. I think it was right around the time around the 2000s, mostly with Brokeback Mountain, where there was more of a better representation of homosexuals in movies and TV, which was done much better than it was around this time period. But that's really kind of one of the interesting factors about this documentary. You get a good idea from the little bits that I've seen about what it used to be like back in the day. How did they get around that type of stuff? And listen to all these different people talk about their experiences with that type of stuff. Sounds like it could be a very interesting documentary. I gotta try to see if I can find the whole thing at some point. But Celluloid Closet came out in theaters that weekend, so that was one of the ones I needed to talk about. So Let's move on to the next movie that we have here, which is Land and Freedom. So this is a film where you're following the story of David Carr, an unemployed worker and member of the Communist Party of Great Britain, who decides to fight in the Spanish Civil War for the Republicans, a coalition of socialists, communists, and anarchists against a nationalist coup d'etat. And that's really all I know about this one. I've never seen this movie before. I didn't even know about it until now. It was nominated for a Palme d'Or. It was nominated at the Cannes. It won the Cannes Film Festival prize of the Ecumenical Jury. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, I'm sorry. But that's really all I know about this one. I don't really know too much about it. I just knew that it came out at that time. So that's a quick one right there. That's Land and Freedom. So let's move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Tarantella, starring Mira Sorvino. So this is probably something that came out to promote Mira Sorvino when she was getting nominated and eventually won the Oscar for Mighty Aphrodite. She plays this woman, an Italian-American professional photographer who has returned to New Jersey, where she grew up, where her mother dies to settle her estate. In recent years, she didn't get along with her and begins to remember her embittered mother when she abandoned her. Around the same time, she begins to rediscover the heritage she rejected a long time ago when she is amongst her neighbors who are packing up the house. She meets a close friend of her grandmother and late mother's who gives her support in this tough time, and also gives Diane her mother's last gift, a secret journal kept by her. And as it is written in Italian, the woman must read it to Diane. This helps her learn more about her mother's history, and as she does, she finally comes to terms with the relationship they had and her own Italian heritage. So that's really all I know about this one. Notably, Frank Pellegrino is also in here, but most notably Matthew Lillard, who would later break out a year later in Scream. He's also in this movie as well. That's pretty much all I know about this movie. I'm guessing that they put this out because of the Oscar buzz that was building for Sorvino and Mighty Aphrodite. So that's really all I know about this movie. I haven't seen it, so I can't really say if it's good or not, but came out in theaters this weekend, so talk about it as well. So that is Tarantella. So with that said, that's going to wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll have 7 more movies to look at, including Diabolique. We also have Spike Lee's Girl 6. We also have Race the Sun, Flirting with Disaster, It's My Party, Jack and Sarah, and Frisk. So 7 movies to look at next time around, and we will delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.